I was in the debris sea when the human warship uncloaked, sorting petitioners and stray museums into the Concordance queue. The debris sea isn't water, but a slow gyre of shattered monuments a long-ago battle site politely, tacked with beacons so no one forgets. It's where newcomers with audacity go to make a point. The warship appeared as a lack. We did not see it so much as sense a clean-edged hole where stark crowd noise should have been. Its hull, if we can call a metaphysical perimeter a hull drank, radar, microwave hiss, and the jitter of cosmic dawn relics. Against that pristine subtraction, the background looked messy, as if the universe had left smudges. "Identify," said the Concordance, projecting courtesy across every known protocol. "And a few we keep in case something older replies." The translation days under my hands flickered through Sinespace's chemical logic for the Coral Riley, infrared tone for the Mesk, scent path for the Hadri with their sail balloons. The days thrummed with my own voice as well, as archivist and witness. Silence answered. Then something like the inverse of a voice and eloquence of missing data. Across 16 bands at once, the warship deleted static in a staggered pattern, carving gaps in the always-on background. Those gaps, when layered, formed glyphs. I turned off auditory translation. There's a dignity in letting a thing be exactly what it is. The glyphs read, "We are late." The Mesk custodian clicked his beak. "Humans," he murmured, and even his whistling consonant had an edge. Humanity was an old rumor in the Concordance, an off-axis rise on the far spiral that had flared and dimmed before we'd invented a proper way to say hello. They left relics like fingerprints in the isotopes of swamped planets. They left nothing in person. They did not come when invited. They did not refuse. Another sentence cut itself into the sky by erasing. The debris sea fell still. No gossip, no salvage chatter, no overlapping hello worlds. Even the stately hum of the beacons was suppressed, their good manners overwritten by a lack with edges sharp enough to draw blood. We are alone. The lack blossomed then into a ship that could be seen, a wedge of mat that ate light and gave back rules. It bore no markings except a filament of optical brighteners that spelled out a name only when the ship rotated just so. As it rolled, starshine skittered along a line of embedded prisms, and for an instant I read, VIGIL. Warship class, the Concordance asked me privately, meaning catalog it. Unknown class. I whispered, but that thing has the posture of a vessel with much larger hands than anyone shows in polite space. I could feel it without instruments, the confidence of layered failsafes, a hull memory that had been shot and shot again and come back to perfect black. The debris sea is a place where only ghosts fail to flinch. Here was something that refused to flinch. A delegate of the dust parliament drifted near me, his stack of microfactories swirling like glitter. What if this is a prank? He speculated. He loved pranks. His people did not die when burned through. They sublimed and recondensed. The warship spoke again in absences. This vessel, VIGIL, guard of the silence, war legacy. Humanity, absent. Mission, inform, offer a treaty. Condition, listen. A scar across the debris sea, the spine of a toppled cannon the length of a moon lifted itself delicately from drift and fell back without a sound. The warship had not fired. It had simply wrapped the cannon in a field that canceled its noise. The cannon landed, and I heard nothing even when I pressed my whole sensorium against the impact. It was like watching a scream swallowed by a hand. "I think," said the Mesk, rasping slowly, "we are now at war with metaphors," or I said, "They're demonstrating their thesis. Our etiquette required a reciprocal demonstration. Some sign we understood the gesture." I pinched the days to the silence channel and wove the old archive sigil. A spiral wound. A spiral soothed using only dead space. It cost the Concordance pride to yield so many bands for an unknown. But the debris sea is not only a memorial. It is a school. We can be taught. The warship rewarded us with brevity. Who will listen best? I stepped forward, farther than protocol advised. I am Tava Bether of the Concordance Arches. I am the ear that writes. I will listen. The hulls. Bright thread pulsed. A seam opened with the reluctance of a coffin lid. A gangway extended, not smooth, but made of facets like a swallow's folded wing. Gases vented without sound. Light bled out only along the edges of metal and did not disperse beyond the gangway. Even illumination was disciplined here. Archivist. The concordance murmured, meaning we did not say you could go, meaning you had better bring a story. Concordance, I murmured back, meaning I always do. I crossed onto Vigil and entered a museum of war. Not a gallery of weapons, those there too. Neat as hymns but of reaction. A corridor lined with images of faces holding the moment just before grief. Humans watch me watch them from stacked frames of transparent memory. Some were powdered with the fine silt of moon dust. Some wore plastic crowns from cheap festivals. I knew these were recordings of people long dead or sublimed or fled. But the corridor was hung so carelessly it felt domestic. At the far end, a room shaped like a human throat. It was all soft curve and cartilage glaze. An acoustic chamber built to make whispers intelligible. In its center stood a pedestal lit at its edges, and on the pedestal sat a cube that was not a cube. Every angle was a gradient. Every face was a paradox. The object reminded me of a joke the Dust Parliament once told. A shape so modest in exterior that it dares everything in interior. It was glowing a nervous heartbeat when I entered. Archivist, said the cube, not by sound but by the subtle removal of hum from my blood. It took the music of my veins and returned words. You have learned the first grammar, to make meaning with lack. Will you learn why? I will, I said, and the room gathered my answer and placed it lovingly in a jar. Then let us do what we did not do. In time, begin. Humans built Vigil as a promise machine. The cube, which called itself a monologue engine, had once been one mind, and then many braided to act as one. Humans had discovered they could not tell anyone what they needed to tell without controlling not only their own voice but the background against which it was heard. And so they learned to speak by carving space. We rose noisy, the engine said, and on the walls the corridor portraits became a river of quick scenes neon. Cities and campaigns with names like Dustless War and Low Orbit Harvest. Art forms performed by whole neighborhoods, gigantic dishes fanning and swiveling. An ocean crowded with clipper blimps writing poems in fog. I saw a species drunk on call and response. We wanted to be heard by whatever wanted to hear. We believed. The universe was a room you enter and shout your name. You weren't wrong, I said. We heard you when you were already over, like lightning after a storm. The engine undulated, a shiver of not quite geometry. We were heard by something that hears hunger. We named it the Warden because first we thought it hit us, and then we learned it muzzled us. A thin, unpleasant chord hummed the floor. The engine cut it off so quickly the absence rang like a chime. The Warden is not an empire. Empires want tax. The Warden wants thermodynamics arranged as preferences. It selects for quiet universes. It makes feedback loops where civilizations that shout draw selection pressures that favor silence. It does this in the way wind makes. Sand dunes, not consciously, not with malice, but with relentless patience. Do you understand? I did. We had whole fields of study about invisible selectors, how tidal rhythms shape bone, how stars bias chemistry. We argued whether near-field gods existed. The concordance had never found evidence a god took notes, but we had found patterns. How does it act? I asked. A visual, stars go in dark without explosion, as if their light were persuaded not to enter the universe. Networks of beacons flashing for help, and then stuttering to still, antennae peeling like old paint. Species with throat organs that calcified after 3 generations of singing on the loud band. Everywhere a trend line pulled down. We tested. The engine said. We made ourselves quiet across the wide bands, then loud again in new bands, then quiet. The Warden adjusted. It learns but never speaks. Then how did you survive? I asked, though I knew the answer because of the corridor's faces. They didn't. We left, said the engine simply. We took our loudness outside the galaxy to break the correlation. We diverted ourselves across the inner void into null. Geodesics where the Warden's influence falls to background. We became an echo you hear long after the singer goes behind the hill. We built Vigil and a few of her sisters and taught them to say the one thing we could not say in time: listen before you speak. Because listening is not only courtesy but physics. You came back. I said. We came back too late, the engine said, and did not pretend to apology. we thought the concordance would have found our quiet. We thought someone would have slowed down and waited for us. Instead, there was commerce at every frequency, a glee of interoperable attention. We prided ourselves on universal translators that could eat a shape and spit out a welcome. We built markets in spans the size of nebulae. We made cathedrals out of waveguides and taught them to hum, in a way that soothed the old battle sites. One of those cathedrals was the debris sea, where you announce yourself by singing along. I felt my stomach drop as if I'd been told a song I loved was bait. "What do you want from us?" I asked. The engine dimmed until the room felt like the inside of a stone, to be speechless for a while, and then to speak on purpose. "You can't tell the galaxy not to talk," I said. "I can teach it a new grammar," the engine replied. "I can show you how to embed meaning in what you were going to do anyway. I can give you Absence-craft, to ride on noise without rising above it, to hide signals in the way clouds form, to adjust stellar flicker so a sentence is a long eclipse. And I can give you a trap, I repeated. The archivist in me bristled, the citizen in me leaned in. The engine showed me machinery I did not have names for, axion mirrors hinged to gravitic lenses at the halo, neutrino corrals braided like kelp around dwarf stars, a cathedral that was not a building, but a process, the cathedral of vacuum, whose priests would be algorithms tending absence like a garden. It would take a generation of planners, 10 of patient calibration. It would require a pause in all the glorious commerce that had made the concordance. A chorus of millions. We lower our emissions. We stop being bait, I said. You lower them in a pattern that looks like being eaten, the engine said. With a human cruelty that was not unkind, we make the galaxy look like a dying noise source. When the warden arrives, if arrival is the word for a selection pressure everywhere, it expects to find the loudest cavity, my sister's, and I will raise a negative shout. Negative, I said cautiously. We invert the signature the warden selects for. We make a valley where a peak should be. It is a strike not against a thing but against a behavior. The warden will try to continue its work and will push itself into our hollows. There it will find a teeth, a humorless beat. You will not see a corpse. You will see a statistical trend break. A long curve of silence will start to wobble. That wobble is victory. How long? I asked. 211 of your years for the first measurable wobble. 25,000 to change the preference landscape. We can shorten that by being more convincingly prey. We can lengthen it by being cowardly at the wrong times. I thought of the concordance assembly, where nothing important can be said, until it has been said 10 polite ways. I thought of the dust parliament with their appetite for pranks. I thought of the Coral Riley, who coordinate in perfumes that take months to brew. I thought of the debris sea, where we had chosen to house our memory of violence by singing it softly, until even the wreckage swayed. How do I convince them? I said. The engine pulsed a human rhythm, the breath you take before a difficult admission, by giving them something beautiful to lose. So Vigil performed. We went back to the sea. The warship's gangway unscrolled, and the hull's prism thread spelled Vigil to everyone who needed a proper noun. The concordance opened. Every ear, the warship deleted every sound, and then it told the galaxy a story without a single audible syllable. Vigil painted in absences, a child on an earth that spun blue, learning her star by tracing it with a finger. On a pane of condensation, a couple building a cheap kite and letting it go into wind at a polluted beach. 1,000 hands lifting a bridge into place because the cranes were late. A city drinking from a river made clean again because someone decided to do the boring work. A ship leaving with a cheer that never reached the orbiting camera. An old person asleep in a chair while rain ticked without hurry on a window. None of this was heroic warfare. None of it was the kind of thing that makes a concordance assembly whoop. It was, however, a reason. When the story ended, the debris sea was not silent, but speechless, not suppressed, but stunned. The dust parliament, who loved pranks, folded their microfactories into neat little cubes and tucked them away like hats in a storm. The Coral Riley let their perfumes go sour, which is how they signal seriousness. The Mesk, who count their feelings on their tongues, tasted metal and nodded. Archivist, the concordance asked. It sounded like a child on a threshold. Begin, I said. I will write the vow." We named the vow in all our languages and pinned it with our clumsy heraldry. The compact of deliberate quiet. We did not outlaw voice, we ray-weighted it. We retuned beacons to whisper below the noise floor, embedded votes in stellar twinkle, rewrote our fashions so dies carried type-bend messages that only your clothing would ever understand. The markets with their loud fireworks of commerce learned to do design in fog instead. We lost a little glamour and gained a little craft. Vigil taught us absence craft with the patience of a weaver teaching children to keep tension even. The dust parliament became our saboteurs of fondness. They made failures that failed so gracefully that no one noticed them go, turning the loudest entertainments into small pleasures. They invented a game where you score by not trending. They were never happier. The Coral Riley invented perfumes that refused to evaporate on days we needed quiet. They braided a century-long symphony into currents so slow that when you waded through the shallows of their home reef, you emerged scented with a note that would be part of a chord to generations hence. They painted with weather. The Mesk invented tongue braille for their young, so they could talk in storms with their mouths closed. And a culture of closed-mouth poetry rose that was better than anything they'd howled in the arenas. They did not admit it for a while. Then they bragged carefully in ways only other quiet poets could parse. I found that adorable. We built the cathedral of vacuum in the halo, and saying we built it is a simplification like saying a glacier walks. We positioned stations at the cusps of gravitational lenses where dark matter's polite dialect becomes twitchy. We hung axion mirrors like sheets. We persuaded neutrinos to queue. We seeded quantum diodes in the cosmic rain and encouraged them by tiny biases repeated across width to point downhill together. During those years, Vigil waited like a teacher who knows the exam will be brutal and will come whether her class is ready or not. Sometimes she would perform another human absence, a dinner table with one chair pulled back, a crowd at a launch site looking at a contrail that ends off screen, a hand-lettered sign that says nitrogen monoxide hunting stuck crooked in red clay. Sometimes the corridor of faces would reconfigure, and I'd stand there alone in the throat room and let myself grieve for a species I'd never met. I cried without sound, and the room swallowed even that. 211 years is long if you are a single body and short if you are a nation. I had both. The concordance extended my tenure with treatments that make archivists into their own footnotes, iron bones that remember and hair that forgets. I kept writing and I learned, absurdly, to be quieter about writing, to cache drafts in the pattern of footfalls in public squares and publish when a city exhaled. The wobble came as promised. It arrived not as a trumpet, but as an error bar that wouldn't behave. Across the galaxy, the long, depressing slope that had given theologians an excuse to give up the slow dimming we had half blamed on entropy and half on cosmic disappointment grew indisciplined. There was wiggle. In the council's observatory, the statisticians, who had sworn eternal war on enthusiasm, had to put their heads down on their desks for a moment. "This is it?" asked the concordance, incredulous even in celebration. "This is the beginning of it," said Vigil, who had told us for centuries how small victories must be named precisely. "We begin now the part that will hurt. The warden, if it can be said to do anything, does not think. It prefers." Our whole project was to present it with a galaxy where preference for quiet pulled it into a particular shape. Once shaped, Vigil would fill the hollows with a negative shout that used no energy at all, because it spent accounting dead instead. We had banked quiet. Over centuries we had starved our own reflex to signal, until a deficit had built in a kind of etiquette ledger that Vigil could cash out in an instant. Think of a dam that holds back not water, but behaviors we had become good enough to hold back a flood of us. Vigil would open the gates. "Where?" I asked, my throat dry. "At the debris sea." Vigil said, "Of course, at the sea. Where else in our galaxy do we practice admitting what we ruined, and practicing it with courtesy? Where else had we learned? We dressed the wrecks with new antennas that looked like lichen. We asked the beacons to go still, and they obeyed as if they'd been waiting to be given permission to rest. We came from every branch of the concordance, in platforms designed to leave little trace, refraining even from pride about our restraint. The sea went as quiet as creation, and then I understood at last what left speechless would come to mean in our histories. Not that the warship suppressed us, but that we chose to hold our voices because we wanted to hear the hinge of the world. The negative shout began. The sky pressed on my skin the way it does when a storm piles all its weather against one door. Then that pressure reversed, and I had the odd sensation of feeling lighter without being lifted. It is an uncanny thing to witness the absence of a preference. Imagine watching a law decide it is bored with itself. Imagine habit fall asleep in the middle of its sentence. It is difficult to narrate a behavior changing its mind across a space the size of everything, because the metaphors want you to pretend you can see it from above. I could not. None of us could. But the debris sea's wrecks began to sing again, in the smallest way, as if the ship's skeletons remembered the jokes told by crews long dead, and couldn't help giggling in their joints. Stars on the far side of the spiral winked one by one. A long, slow fence of light ray nodded. Sensors recorded glitches that corrected not to zero, but to variety. Vigil opened more gates. The pressure lifted further. The statistics sobbed in their own language. The tales of distributions chattered. The medians wobbled with joy. The standard deviations threw rice at one another. No empire fell. No god descended. No monster shrieked. But the warden's long, whether tyrannical in its patience, found pockets where patience was no longer rewarded. It peeled away like fog in the presence of a big, gentle fan dot in the throat room. The monologue engine began to dim. You spend yourself on the shout, I asked, though I knew already. A promise machine spends its promise eventually, or else it betrays its premise. We were designed to be spent, said the engine. We were descendants of those who learned late. We prefer not to be late twice. What will become of you? I asked. What you are watching, said the engine. A long curve ending in a still point. We like still points. They are good. Places to watch very small lights. I will keep you alive in the way I know, I said. I will write you and teach students to breathe below their rage. It was a vow bigger than me. It tasted of metal like Mesk poems. Vigil's hull thread spelled its name one last time, so those who read by prism would not misunderstand which ship had spent itself. Then the black wedge unlaced along seams we had never seen, folded in on itself, like a hand turned to hide a palm, and became as when it first arrived, mostly absence. The corridor portraits flickered and settled not into faces, but into landscapes. Halls without people, rooms with half-made tea, chairs pulled back and never sat in. Humans' last story for us was their world without them, and somehow it did not feel like punishment, but like a trust. The compact held. Not perfectly, nothing involving clever species ever does, but with the kind of fidelity that keeps a culture's backbone warm. We spoke differently because we had learned to. They will ask in 1,000 years students with fewer bones than me and more sun to be told why we made a cathedral with no walls. I will take them to the debris sea and ask them to listen to the small creaks of old wrecks. I will tell them about a warship that taught by taking away sound, and a selection pressure that never intended anything but got its way until it did not. I will say, first contact with a human warship left the galaxy speechless, and I will pause to let the literal interpretation die and the better one grow. Then I will teach them the first grammar Vigil taught me in that throat-shaped room, the sentence you make with your breath only, the one every species can learn to say without moving a muscle.